This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Peninsula Regional Medical Center.
Well, spring sports are in full force right now, and while it can be fun, it can also be nerve-wracking for parents. We hear so much about concussions and the damage they can cause, and it's easy to cringe whenever we see our little ones get hit or even making contact with another player.
Tell me about it. Well, many times the focus is on football, but the truth is there are other contact sports that can be just as dangerous. For instance, soccer. In fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics reports the contact while playing soccer is at the same level as contact during football, ice hockey, and lacrosse. And 4 to 22% of all soccer injuries involve the head. Well, Dr. James Burns is the medical director of Peninsula Regional Medical Center's Occupational Health and Urgent Care. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
First of all, let's start off with what is a concussion?
A concussion is what they call a minimal traumatic brain injury. It's sort of on the spectrum of from just a bump to the head all the way to serious internal bleeding. And it's sort of down at the bottom there. If it's recognized, it can have a good result. If it's unrecognized, that's when we start getting into trouble.
It still needs to be taken seriously.
Absolutely, yes.
So while it's at the bottom of the scale, it's still a brain injury.
Yeah, it's a brain injury. We just can't see it on scans yet, or we haven't been able to identify it radiographically like CT, MRI, or any other type of scans quite yet.
And how do we get a concussion?
A concussion is simply, it's either a direct blow to the head or an indirect blow to the head. Now, indirect blow to the head, example of that is boxing. Getting struck on the face, which is not really your head, but it torques your head to the point where you get a sort of contre coup injury in the brain. It rattles around like the egg inside of an eggshell, and causes the injury that way.
And there are about, what, 8 million concussions a year?
They estimate that somewhere about 8 million sports-related head injuries, whether they result in a concussion or anything more severe, it remains to be seen. Every time these football players line up on the line, every play, there's a head injury. That's an essential part of their blocking equipment, is their heads.
But it's not just football, is it? I mean, we talk football, but there's baseball, there's even soccer.
Oh, the soccer, the cheerleading, lacrosse, ice hockey, boxing, baseball, softball, rugby. All of them have to lesser or greater degrees of head trauma. The sexy one is football, because there's so many more actually, and that's gotten most of the press right now.
And even sports where you wear a helmet, like roller derby was one that we were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, a helmet is a good protective device, but it's not going to protect you completely. In fact, there are no complete protections against concussion or head injury. None.
So how can we know if it is a concussion?
There's pretty good signs. The easiest one is when a player takes a big blow to the head and drops to the ground. Trainer will go over. Easily identified types of symptoms are some alteration of consciousness. So they were sort of stunned or dazed, or a brief loss of consciousness completely. They may be disoriented, like what play is this, what am I doing here, so forth. They might be nauseated, a little irritable, and so forth. They should be immediately removed from play and not allowed to go back. In fact, the American Medical Association of Sports Medicine has put a position statement out that says there's absolutely no same-day return to play with a concussion.
So
if you
how
suspect
long
a concussion.
are we talking? How many days?
Typically, if you recognize it, 7 to 10 days, most of these kids are back to normal, and they can progressively increase their activity level not only in school but in their sports, and then be allowed to go back into competitive practice and play.
So they might have to sit out a game.
A few games, yeah.
Maybe a few games, because it's not just the one that's the biggest problem?
No, it's the cumulative effects. If it's unrecognized, that they propose that there's a vulnerable period of the brain, which is based upon the 1920s data of cumulative traumatic encephalopathy that is now being identified on brain biopsies from boxers in the 1920s, which leads to permanent neurological condition and death, and can lead to all sorts of serious neurological problems.
Like stroke, dementia?
Yeah, they've all been associated with that. So.
That's amazing.
Very interesting. And like you said, death.
Scary. Yeah.
So is there anything that we can do to protect ourselves from getting concussions?
Yeah, buy an e-reader. Go home and do your homework.
Go home
Don't
and read
play.
books.
No, it's just recognizing that a concussion took place, and you'll get full recovery most of the time. I mean, as long as it's recognized. And the push is now to recognize concussions early and remove the child from play so the brain can heal itself and then go back in.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Burns, for
my
joining
pleasure.
us
Sure.
this afternoon. And if you would like more information from PRMC on concussions, go to delmarvalife.com and click on the show tab.
Well, still to come on Delmarva Life, carpets don't last forever, and there comes a point where you just gotta rip out the old one and put down a new one.
What you should be looking for when it comes to making sure your carpet stands the test of time, plus a stain demonstration, you have to see to believe.
But first, we've already talked about protecting your head. Now Dr. Oz tells us how we can protect our hips.
Hi, I'm Dr. Oz. Broken hips are the #1 fracture in older women. For those whose mother or sister has suffered a hip fracture, you're even more at risk. Talk to your doctor about a DEXA scan, which measures osteoporosis. To strengthen bones, eat calcium-rich foods like collard greens and sardines. Also, do weight-bearing exercise.